I also could end up writing code that does this. I could do this using an overloaded operator, and I'll show you how to do that really quickly. Although I just want to rant on overloaded operators for a second. Overloaded operators in general hide code from the user, and they can trick a programmer into thinking that an operation is really easier or less work than it actually is. So whenever you make an overloaded operator, you want to do so with caution, because you may be accidentally inserting code that a programmer doesn't fully understand into their program. That's really a problem when you're writing code for other people. What I just want to say is that when you overload operators, you want to do so with caution. So let me show you how to do that really quick. Bool operator equals equals coordinate ampersand other, and I'll just return is other, and spell coordinate correctly. G and oh yeah, we're pretty close together. So now that will work here, and if I wanted to, I could get that code to work there as well. Bingo. While I'm at it, I'm going to get rid of width and height, and I'll replace them with a coordinate size 2010. Size.y, size.x, just because I'm crazy about objects. I want to go over some terminology very briefly. Size would be considered an object of the type coordinate. Coordinate is a structure, and location is an object. Secret lock is an object. Input is a primitive variable of type int, and secret lock is an object of type coordinate. That can be meaningful when you're communicating about computer science to other programmers. So now I want to show you a class. This right here is a struct, and this is a class. I'm going to make the player class, and the player class will basically be the location and the icon here, although I can't just copy and paste like that, because this code right here is defining the members of player, and when you define the member, you're not allowed to give it values like this to initialize it. You have to do that inside of the constructor. So I'll make a player constructor, and I'll do int x, int y, char icon, and in here I can do lock xy icon icon, and no body. Now if I want to use this down here, I'll do this player p at location 4, 5 with the number 1, ASCII code 1, as his icon, which is the smiley face. And what's going on here? Why can I not do this? It's declared as inaccessible. Oh, that's right. A struct is by default public. That means that everything inside of the struct is available to everybody all the time. Anybody can ask a structure, hey, what's in your x variable? But with a class, everything is by default private. If you want things to be accessible, you have to make them explicitly public. In the struct, you could similarly make things private and public. And whatever is private cannot be accessed anymore by code outside of the class itself. So coordinate is allowed to access the x variable, but main is not allowed to access the x variable of the coordinate. So I can't do p.lock, even though it says lock is a legitimate variable here, because the lock is private. The reason we have this difference, and let me just take the public and private code out of the struct, is because having code private forces a programmer to be unable to use parts of the class. And you may be wondering, well, why is that a good thing? Why would you want to keep other programmers from looking at or from using pieces of code that I wrote in my class? And the reason for that is because we don't want other programmers to worry about the inner workings of our class. We don't want them to even have the option. We don't want them to have the opportunity to get confused about how our class does anything, about any of our class's inner workings. So we make our classes private by default, so they hide their data. If there is data that needs to be shared with other people from outside the class, then you can make what's called an accessor that will give access to some of that data. Coordinate get lock, for example, will return the lock. This is a function, get lock, and it takes in no arguments, and it just returns the location. This actually returns by value, which means that it returns a copy of the location. This is meaningful, and I'll show you why in a minute. So right here, when we can't access lock, we can access get lock, and when we can't access icon, I can make a accessor called char get icon, turn icon. P.get icon. And down here, this would need to be p.get lock. And what's the deal here? Must be a modifiable L value. Huh? getLock returns a copy of a coordinate. And that copy disappears as soon as this line of code is over, which means that there's no real reason to modify its Y value. And that's what Visual Studio is complaining about. It's saying that, hey, the result of this statement is going to be a coordinate. That's fine, but it's not really modifiable. Why are you doing that? The way that we can change that is by returning the coordinate by reference, and then this will compile, but some programmers may consider this bad code because it kind of eliminates the whole purpose of having private data to begin with. If you just return the data and allow the user to do whatever they want with it through this function, why bother hiding it at all? So I'm one of the programmers who sees some value in that train of thought, so I'm going to leave it like this. Actually, first, just let me show you that this will work. That if I put the ampersand there and I return by reference, this will compile and everything will work here. Yep, I was even able to move around. But taking the other train of thought, there's a better way to do this. This code here is accessing elements inside of the player pretty regularly. In fact, you may look at this code and wonder, why is it that main is going in and modifying the data of player? Shouldn't the player kind of take care of itself? The point of object-oriented programming is that you combine variables with the functions required to manipulate them. And here it looks pretty clear that I want to do some functionality to my player. I want my player to move based on the input that I give. This should really be code inside of player rather than code that main has to deal with. So I'm going ahead and do that. I'm going to make a move function, and I'll grab input here, and I'll do this like so. Now I don't need to do the accessor, and I don't even need to do p dot because I'm inside of the player itself. And in here, oh, you know what? I do want WASD, even if I don't want this code. P.move input. Switch input. There we go. The class is doing all of its own movement itself.